In the early hours of a winter morning back in 2000, a crime was committed in the heart of Hiroshima that, to this day, is just a haunting, unsolved mystery. It's a tragic story that left behind way more questions than answers. Okay, let's dive into this. Everything starts right here, January 20th, 2000, at 3:50 in the morning. In that cold, pre-dawn quiet, a passerby is about to make a discovery that will kick off a mystery that's still going on today.
And this is just heartbreaking. These were some of the last words the victim ever spoke. In a desperate phone call to a friend just moments after the attack, she managed to get out the horror of what was happening to her. It's a crucial and just tragic piece of the timeline.
So how did this all start for the authorities? Well, it all begins with the initial discovery in a place that, thousands of people would use every single day.
So, someone walking through the Johoku pedestrian underpass stumbles upon a pretty horrifying scene. There's a young woman on the ground, bleeding. But, and this is so important, she was still conscious. The witness immediately ran to a nearby police box for help, but despite how fast they acted, she died from blood loss less than an hour later. That tiny window where she could have identified her attacker, it just slammed shut. Forever. To even have a chance at understanding what happened, investigators had to piece together the final hours of the victim's life. Who was she and where had she been? The victim, who is known in the case files only as Kay, was just 16 years old. She'd left high school, was working a part-time job, and lived nearby with her family. What's really interesting is that friends later said she told them she had something important she needed to talk about, and that little detail just adds another layer of mystery to her final hours.
And this is what's absolutely critical to understand, just how narrow this timeline is. Kay spent the evening with friends, then a taxi dropped her off near her home around 3:30 a.m. We see her on security footage going into a Lawson convenience store, and that's the last time she was seen alive. The attack, that heartbreaking phone call, and her discovery, it all happened in the span of about 20 minutes.
So let's talk about the crime itself. Because when investigators started looking at the evidence, this case went from being a tragic street crime to something far, far stranger. So what was it about this attack that just immediately stood out? Well, it wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't find that baffled them right from the start. This is so important. The most common motives were just gone, right off the table. This wasn't a robbery. Her wallet was there, cash and all. There were zero signs of sexual assault, and maybe the most telling thing of all, she had no defensive wounds. Nothing, which suggests she was either taken completely by surprise or she didn't see her attacker as a threat until it was way too late. And this is where the case becomes truly bizarre. The attack wasn't some chaotic frenzy. It felt methodical. While the fatal wounds were to her chest, she had 4 other stab wounds in this chillingly symmetrical pattern. 2 on her back near her armpits, and 2 on the back of her thighs. And to make it even stranger, one of the straps on her backpack had been partially cut. Okay, so you have a perplexing crime scene and no obvious motive. The police investigation pretty much hit a wall right away. They were hunting for a ghost, someone who had left behind almost no clues as to who they were or why they did this. Now, based on the wounds, forensic experts could guess the type of weapon used. A thin knife, maybe a stiletto or a utility knife, with a blade around 10 centimeters long. But despite searching everywhere, even using metal detectors on the nearby riverbed, the murder weapon was never recovered.
The police, they did everything by the book. They set up a special task force, they interviewed everyone in Kay's life, but nobody knew of any trouble she was in. They scoured the entire area. The problem was there were almost no witnesses. So in the end, every single step they took just led to another dead end.
This right here, this was the core problem for law enforcement. They knew so much about the what. They had the timeline down to the minute. They knew the cause of death. They saw those bizarre symmetrical wounds. But they had absolutely nothing on the who or the why. The most critical pieces of the puzzle were, and still are, completely missing. So the whole investigation just stalled out, caught between these 2 completely different theories. Was this a deeply personal, targeted attack by someone she knew? Maybe someone with a very specific grudge? Or was it the horrifyingly random act of a thrill killer who just chose her for reasons no one will ever understand?
As the years turned into decades, the case file just got thicker, but no closer to being solved. The main story went cold, but there was still a very strange and sad epilogue to be written.
Yeah, in 2003, in a really bizarre and tragic footnote to this case, Kay's adoptive mother was arrested. She had fraudulently claimed over $1,000,000 in survivor's benefits, pretending she was still raising Kay, even though they weren't living together. She was convicted and got a suspended prison sentence, which just adds another layer of sadness to the family story.
And so, this is where we are today. The official file is still open, but the key facts are as stark and as frustrating as they were on day one. Perpetrator, unknown. Motive, unknown. The status, unsolved. The strange, symmetrical wounds and the total lack of any clear motive, it's what makes this case really stand apart. It's a puzzle of human behavior at its most inexplicable. And it leaves all of us with one final haunting question. In a crime with no witnesses and no motive, can justice ever truly find its way?